Hello, everybody. My name's Chris, and I'm a bookaholic. Well, obviously, we just started 2024, and everybody's been doing their top 10 list for the 2023 year, and I figured I would give this a go. The truth is, I read a lot of different books, probably than the vast majority of BookTube out there in terms of specifically the BookTube that I follow. Those accounts that I follow really focus a lot on fantasy and science fiction, and I do love that. But it's certainly not everything that I'm reading. And so I wanted to put together a kind of a unique list, and then we'll see what happens. In some ways, I'm breaking this down into three categories. The first is nonfiction, and the second is religious, and the third is basic fiction, inclusive of fantasy and science fiction. So it's realistic that a lot of you have already tuned out. And that's okay. First and foremost, though, let's just start with nonfiction. And I like to read a variety of different nonfiction works, and it can be everything from, biographical or, clinical or, specifically for writers, which I'll include an example of this. So here's the top. I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush here, but the top few books that I have, and I'll try to go in order, because I'm only going to do three, I think, for nonfiction. So number 3 is Novelist as a Vocation by Haruki Murakami. And I was really fascinated with his kind of tips for people who are interested in the craft of writing. Now, I do write, and I have a number of books I've published. They're nonfiction, though, and they're specifically within the religious category. So I don't talk about that a lot, but as a person who does write, I was curious, especially by someone I consider to be a phenomenal and, really a legendary author, and that's Haruki Murakami. And I'm certain that I'm somehow pronouncing his name wrong, but I do love his stuff. This is a collection of essays specifically for those who write, and I do think it would probably be more applicable and relevant for people who write fiction, and I also do think that it would be advantageous to anyone who likes Murakami's work. But if you're the basic, novelist, somebody who writes nonfiction, even these are like important insights from someone who has really a lifetime of examples when it comes to excellence, literary excellence. So if you're a writer, that's certainly something I would recommend. I enjoyed it. I kind of just took a little bits here and there. The essays are not long, and it's over a longer period of time. The second is a book called Sure, I'll Join Your Cult, a memoir of mental illness and the quest to belong anywhere by Maria Bamford. And I love this. I personally like biographies, and if I find a biography from a comedian I'm interested in, then I like especially to listen to the audio of it. And so that's what I did with Bamford's book. I felt like, for me, Maria Bamford was like the perfect mix of storytelling, comedy, and really addressing some serious issues. So I loved it. And so that's my number 2 in terms of nonfiction. Number 1, really in a league of its own, is Bessel van der Kolk's The Body That Keeps the Score. Now look, many of you may not be interested in this, but Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. I looked at some of the reviews on Goodreads, and some people are inclined to, love it, and I'm in that category. Some people, I think, were frustrated, and some of the lower starred reviews really kind of synthesize into, I'm a person who was abused, and I didn't really feel like he gave a lot of practical tips. This is a book that's an overview of therapeutic principles and practices, some exploratory things even during its time, of things that he found to be advantageous in his work, in his clinical work and therapeutic work. And honestly, I think that's how you're supposed to read the book. These are things worthwhile in terms of exploring. Some may work, some may not work very well. And then he gave examples, lots and lots of examples, and some people got irritated with all the examples, but that's kind of what the book is. It's meant to be, here are examples, this is how it can work, and how it's worked at times for me, but he's not going into a play-by-play, for every single scenario. That's impossible. That's why you have a therapist for all intents and purposes. And, your therapist should be reading this book. I mean, that's the truth, and they probably already have. So it's a classic for a reason, though, and I felt like I could probably listen to that book or read that book every single year. There's so much there. So that's definitely far and away the best for me with regards to just basic nonfiction. The second category is the religious, and I recognize that a lot of you are not in that category in terms of reading, and I'm just going to mention probably three, but not in necessarily perfect order. Like, in other words, it could change. The order could change depending on the day. And I'll give three, and then I'm going to give an honorable mention to one that irritated me and was probably beneficial because of that. So here's the first. Bread That Is Broken by Father Wilfred Stinnison. And Stinnison is somebody I'd read before. I loved his stuff, and I'm a fan of his writing style. He's great. I do think that this is an excellent book. This would be number 3, I guess, if I were going to rate this. Number 2 in terms of religious books would be Trusting God in the Present by Jacques Philippe. I've read almost everything by him. Jacques Philippe is a legend, and his writing style for me always works. And I can't get enough of Jacques Philippe. I kind of wish he wrote a book every single week just to help me navigate through certain spiritual questions and just basic principles and insights. If you've never read Jacques Philippe, he's got an excellent book on peace, and a book on the Holy Spirit, and a book looking a lot at the writings and the contributions of Saint Therese of Lisieux. And so those of you who are Catholic know and recognize probably the benefit of all of that. So, and certainly anyone in the Christian milieu, and maybe even some people who are not necessarily overtly Christian, there still would be certain things that I think that you would enjoy and take to heart from Jacques Philippe. But the best book that I read for religious kind of reflection was a book by a guy named Father Donald Haggerty, The Contemplative Hunger. And I was recommended this book by my spiritual director, and I just soaked in it. I'm reading another book by him currently. It's called Conversion, probably his most famous book, and I'm sure it'll make the list next year. But all that to say, Haggerty is a spiritual director and a legend in terms of his writing, and really reflections even on the dark night of the soul with St. John of the Cross. And look, if you're looking for somebody who is going to take a deep dive into certain spiritual principles that maybe you've not always really kind of reflected on and soaked in and trying to wrestle with, basically even that dark night kind of idea, he's a great person to explore in terms of writings. But that book, The Contemplative Hunger, part of the reason that my director said check this guy out was because he uses a lot of Saint Foucault, and he's a kind of a hero for me. I almost was going to put for my number 1 book, the Charles de Foucault, The Silent Witness, which is the third kind of biography I've read on him, Sergius Lauret. But I decided to put Haggerty in that number 1 slot. So anyway, if you're interested in certain spiritual books, I this is what I primarily have focused on in terms of writings and readings, and it's really kind of the milieu in which I work constantly anyways. The honorable mention is Understanding Divine Mercy by Father Chris Alar. He's a Marian of the Immaculate Conception. I'm very familiar with that order. I have some good friends that are priests in that order. And this book is huge. Father Alar became pretty popular really around it certainly was before, but the 2020 really kind of took his video YouTube channel and kind of threw it into the stratosphere. Traditionally, the MICs are very conservative. That's fine with me. I don't care. But so I recognize that. I knew kind of what I was going to get when I started this. And so I'm always interested in teachings on the Divine Mercy anyways. And so that's what this book was. And there was a lot in there that I really enjoyed. But the way that Father Alar writes can be triggers for me. He kind of looks at almost the approach with that relationship with God, sometimes in a punitive fashion, like, here are the things that you're doing right, here are the things that you're doing wrong, and, kind of... to me, it doesn't always work very well, the language of it, because I'm really a relational person, and, just the realization of how screwed up I can be. Sometimes, the written word can come across in a way that maybe even the author doesn't intend it to be. So I found some of that writing to be a little bit harsh and a little bit disconnected from the way that I process things. But what I found also was that in my irritation, and this is always the case for me, whenever I get irritated with an author that I'm reading concerning a religious book, I always ask the question, why? And why am I being bothered by that? And as I journal that out, process that out, I find some incredible insights. And so in some ways, while I loved... and Haggerty would still be in number one position no matter what for this year. But I did love this book by Alar because he probably provoked in me more pressing out of kind of spiritual principles and ideas than almost any other book this entire year. And for that reason alone, I loved it. It's one of those kind of weird dynamics where you're like, I'm just going to go crazy, if I have to read another paragraph here. And then I'm also like, wow, but if I press this out and I think about this and I chew on it some more. So I'm grateful. I do hope one day I'll have the chance to sit with him and get to know him a little bit. Fun fact, I did get the chance to meet Father Haggerty at an event that we were both at and doing, and he signed all my books. I had all of his books with me because I knew he was going to be there. So anyway, it was kind of cool. Boy, maybe that's where I should end this video, which is just the nonfiction and religious, and then I'll do a part 2, which is the good stuff that you probably are interested in. So anyway, I think I'll do that. I love this stuff, and I hope you do too.